Hello, welcome back to another Pen Talk. Thanks for tuning in. Today's subject is black box. And interesting things about black boxes. Not much can identify what's inside. The size may give you some hint. And of course you know what I usually focus on in my videos, so we'll take a look at this, and it's a PENBBS pen. It has a unique identifier to it, references the website. So PENBBS is kind of like Fountain Pen Geeks or Fountain Pen Network. So it's a fountain pen website that, you know, does a lot of promoting of pens. There's forums, many forums on there. I've looked at it. It's quite nice, but they also produce pens. So I think a viewer recommended I take a look at these, or I just came across them and I thought they looked interesting on the eBay auction, and the pricing was good. So I didn't expect it in a box. It's a standard generic box, a little protective foam cover, and we have the pen. And initial impressions were really nice. Not what I expected, much better than I expected. Very beautiful acrylic. I didn't expect the transparency in the acrylic. The chatoyancy is excellent. It's a kind of unique design. Doesn't look like anything else, unlike some of the other Chinese pens that mimic other pens made outside of China. So overall, blown away. Here's the eBay auction. The price was excellent, and the pen is more than exceeded my expectations, and it exceeds those expectations on many levels. Besides the visual, besides the design, I mean, this is a unique barrel. It really narrows down and then flares back out again, which has its own interesting impact on it. As you open it up, you can see that the section is the same material as the barrel, another thing that's very, very nice. And that's a good size nib on there. It's like a number 6 nib. And it has branding, PENBBS. It is a fine, you know, your standard scroll work. It'll be interesting when we put ink in this pen and see how it writes, because that's going to be the real test. But hey, just looking at it is nice in its own sake. But the challenge is the way this barrel flares out, it does not post. This cap does not fit on there. They've deliberately made the end of this barrel larger than the cap. So I don't think it would have really been that much of an artistic change to narrow this down a little bit so you could post it. It would probably post fairly deeply and give you a place to put your cap, which I know a lot of people like to do, but that's not how they designed it. So it's just an unscrew section. And another thing is nice, the unscrewing, there's a fair bit of resistance to it, but when you take it apart, you'll notice that at the bottom of these threads is a nice clear silicone ring. So this is obviously designed from day one to be used as an eyedropper. A lot of threads there. I would obviously put silicone grease on the threads and the O-ring before I put it together, but it takes some getting used to, because you kind of feel, you don't expect the type of resistance when you take the barrel and section, unscrew the barrel and section like that, but it certainly does. So we're going to take a look at the bits and pieces of this pen, ink it up, and write with it. Disassembles very easily. Just a friction fit number 6 nib. You know, your standard piston converter with the little spring agitator in there to keep the ink down. It also has a interesting nib assembly. This feed is your classic complex, tons of fins, tons of channels. You know, it fits into this interesting little nib collar. There's an O-ring here, there's an O-ring at the top. The nib is also interesting. It looks like a standard number 6. But the tipping material, it seems to be almost like kind of bent. I haven't written with it yet, so I will explore how that writes with. But there's a lot more tipping material above than below. We can compare it to Jinhao number 6, out of your 159 and your 450 or your 750, we'll compare it to a standard Jinhao number 6. As you can see, that tipping material is done differently. Here, more the tipping material is below the plane of the nib versus above. So like I say, I'm interested to see how that'll write. Just it assembles very easily, and I'm impressed with the fact that a lot of the Chinese pens are having this nib collar, which makes it a nice, easy nib assembly. Everything fits together nicely, easily. And then that screws in to the section. Of course, you can put it in the right way. It screws into the section. So it makes it easy to swap nibs. Obviously, the collar has to be compatible. Now, what makes this nib assembly a little bit different is above is the Jinhao 992, which has a number 5 nib on it. And as you can see, the nib assembly is quite larger on the PENBBS to accommodate the number 6 nib. So they're not interchangeable. And I don't know of any large number 6 nibs that come with this type of nib assembly. The other interesting design feature of this pen is the way they put a different type of material here, which I think would be a little softer and give a better seal when it goes up against the nipple inside the section. And also there's a little step here, and it inserts very securely, and you can press it into place and you can feel it just slide into where it needs to go. Very stable. It's not going to come out by accident. There's always a moment of thought about what ink to put in a pen, so I'm on a Robert Oster kick, and frankly blue is frankly the ink to use. Is the chromatography? It is kind of blue. A little bit of pink here at the bottom, a little bit of green, but really an intense blue at the top. So let's ink this up and see how it writes. Because of the unique shape and design of the PENBBS, it doesn't really match up to any other existing pen. The length is comparable to a 78G, slightly shorter than Lamy All-Star. And here's Lingmo L'Oreal, which is like a 992 or your Sailor Pro Color. So lengthwise, it's certainly in that length that is probably most comfortable and most standard. Girth-wise, it's pretty good size girth-wise because it has that large number 6 nib in it. The size of the nib is quite apparent when you compare it to the other pens. The number 6 nib here is certainly much larger, more emphatic a statement, if you would like to say that, versus these nibs, which are more the number 5 series. The grip is very contoured, more contoured than any of these other pens, but not the shape of the Lamy is unique until itself, at least until some other people started to mimic it. Well, we're inked up, ready for the writing sample. This is my previous video with the 991 hooded nib and the Noodler's Blue Upon the Plains of Abraham, and you can see it bled through and show through pretty severely. So nice bulletproof eternal ink, but it does have its challenges with certain paper. Yeah, that's the bleed through from the Fabriano paper, which generally is very good to ink and doesn't have those issues. So one of the things that I get into with pens, especially recently, and especially with Chinese pens, is the nibs drying out. So what I noticed on this one is there's a ledge that's machined inside of the cap. There is no cap liner, but that ledge coincides with the bottom of the section, and we're going to use my trusty light to show you how that works, if it will cooperate. So as you tighten the section and barrel, it stops, and where it stops is where the bottom of that section meets that ledge inside the cap. So that gives you a very, very small area inside there, which should keep that nib as wet as possible, as long as the ink's not too active in drying out. We'll just show you exactly how nice this transparency is, how nice the color is, the chatoyancy. As they, make the shape here, it definitely makes this pen unique and interesting, at least from my experiences with pens. The pen does not post, as we talked about earlier, but one thing that I noticed is this concave area here really fits well into the hand. I mean, this pen was designed to be used unposted. It just feels well. It's very light. We'll give you those weights. So, and the section here is also nice. It's a nice concave nature to it. Flares out at the end, so you know exactly where your fingers are, and you can hold it on the threads. You know there's threads there, but they're certainly not sharp and don't dig in, and there's just a little bit of a ledge here going up into the barrel, but you can hold it wherever you want, and that works fine. I think you can hear the nib. There's a lot of feedback. The nib writes differently than I expected it based on how the tipping material looked. You can see that little turn up there. I haven't done anything to this nib, but I certainly will do some smoothing to reduce the feedback. The other thing is it has a little bit of flex to it, so it opens up. And it is wet, as you can see. The other thing I thought maybe, because a lot of bent nibs work well in reverse, but reverse on this is not pleasant, and it skips, so it wasn't designed to do reverse writing. At least it doesn't appear to be, but you can if you want, and it certainly is a fine line. So this is marked as an F, but I would say it's more like a medium fine, and it's kind of like the fines that are on some of the other Chinese pens, the 992s, the 991s, which really, to me, write more like a medium than a fine. And I think you can tell this thing has no problem laying down a nice patch of ink, which again, I attribute that a lot to the tipping material, and it's frankly blue, so it is definitely a blue ink. So they make a couple versions of this pen. This is the sky blue version, and that's basically describing the acrylic that's used. And there's a pen that has a number to it, no real name. So they're not really fancy, and they continue with that Chinese tradition of just using numbers to identify their pen models. So I did just some simple smoothing on a emery board. I used to use medium and fine. And it doesn't sound that much different, but it is smoother than what it was before. I don't think it's ever going to be a buttery nib. I don't think that's what it was designed to do. But the flow was definitely nice, and it is a very pleasant writer. So hopefully you've enjoyed this look at a interesting pen that I'm happy with. So thank you for watching. May you have many great writing experiences, explore the phenomenal world of pens, inks, and paper. Until we meet again, bye.